know what? My good.
Or not, if you talk about college admission, some
I'm sure like
first can talk about health positions, but everyone else I believe follows that same guideline where it's like
All right.
each other.
Let's go ahead and get ourselves. Everyone survived Halloween stuff, okay? Looks like.
Decently.
All right. We're at a point of moving really quickly into the middle of November, and you need to be getting your projects done. The key there is that you do your presentation before the audience of the organization that you're working with, and then you get feedback from them, written feedback that they have signed off on. So we need to see. And I need some information from you, about what company you're working with, what organization, what group you're working with. So you need to start getting that feedback in. Hopefully today, towards the end of the class time, we'll spend time going over some of the problems you're working with. You should have identified by now a communication problem that is the one you're going to address for them. So they say our managers can't talk to our employees can't talk to our managers, we don't all get along, we can't coordinate on a project, whatever it is. Let's get that question out in front of us as a class so that we can feed back to each other a little bit and find a way to help each other look at the theories. Because the point of the theories is to say these theories should give us insight or ideas about what to do to make a difference. And the difference, of course, for theories from just hunches is that theories come out of a research base. So theories are not just things people thought up. They're things that people thought about, tested, researched, and they've come to be considered reliable guides for communication practice. So they become, for you in the communication major, kind of the tools of your trade, the ways that you can think about what to do in different communication situations. So that's what the theories course is intended to do. So let me check first. Any questions from you about that movement through, and then we have scheduled in to do them in class, review them together, talk about the theories, what we might have learned from doing it. Does anybody approve?
We haven't met with our client yet. We're doing that on Monday, but are you saying that we can bring the problem to class and sort of discuss it before we make our vote?
Yeah, I'm ready to start doing that now. We should be far enough along with you all. Today we'll get two very good theories also for you to work with. We'll talk about symbolic interactionism and coordinated management of meaning. And coordinated management of meaning is a very significant tool for dealing with problems. So,
on the paper you listed like some of the problems, like maybe gossip or rumors.
Yeah, right.
So you have to address that towards one of the theories?
Well, hopefully when you take that letter or whatever you did to your group, they identified something where they have a problem of communication. So, right, so it could be any of those things on that paper or something else, right? And what we're trying to do is to find where are these theories that we're looking at going to do something with that? How are they going to tell us, well, here's an idea. You could look at this. Again, like if you're in an organization and the managers say, well, we can't get this group of people to speak up. They're here, but they don't participate in anything that's going on. They don't contribute to our group processes. What are we going to do about that? Well, you start to think then about, well, why would people not speak up in a group? Why would people not feel like they could have a voice? And you start to think, well, you say, well, okay, we did this thing about spiral of silence. which said that if they think their views are going to be unpopular, they won't voice them. So now we can start to deal with that question. Or we looked at standpoint theory, which said that people experience the world differently. And so if they're experiencing the world in a different way, they may not even think they have a need to have a voice or something. So we look at standpoint, we look at muted group theory that says maybe the language we're using, maybe they're having some kind of experiences that don't fit that language. So we'll look at that question. So the theories give you things to start with. So then we would go back to that manager and we would say, all right, we're communication students at Montclair State, and you told us you have this problem with this group of people, and so here we've prepared 3 things we think we'd encourage you to look at. So you're like consultants to the group, and you recommend, well, you could do this, and here's some questions you could ask, or here's some meetings you could hold, or here's some papers you could write for them. So that's the goal that we're working towards. There's a lot of times if people do find out that you know about communication studies, they will ask you to help solve some problems. You know, and it's very, very much. And I thought I heard Dr. McGuire's name, Maureen McGuire. Anyone have classes with that? Yeah, she's done extensive consulting. You know, she spent a lot of time working with organizations that needed some insights from communication studies. So she'd be a good one to bounce some of your ideas off of in this.
How extensive or how in-depth is our proposal to them supposed to be?
Well, it's highly likely that they're more interested in concrete steps than in the theory behind it. Yeah, so what you want to do is end up with saying, well, we've looked at this kind of thing before, and it would say, here are 4 things you should do with your people. And they're based on the theory. So we should be able, when we hear your presentation, to make the track back to the theories.
So the client doesn't care about the theories.
The client doesn't much care about the theories. Right? We're trying to learn that stuff on the front end so that on the back end you've got the applications. But we spend more time on the concepts here. Yeah. So that's where we're at. So what we'll do today then is we'll do symbolic interactionism, and we'll take a short break. We're going to break twice today. So we're going to take a short break. So don't go far. And then we'll do coordinated management meeting. We'll take a short break. And then we'll come back and work on the communication problems that you might be facing and think about the theories we have and how they would connect. So that's our game plan for today. All right? All right, so let's go at this. Now, it matters, when you're thinking about communication, it matters a great deal what you think about people and how they become who they are when you're going to communicate with them. So we're pushing into an area today that is really a basic area of theoretical difference between people who hold different views. So if I were to ask you this question, when you say that you communicate with somebody, here's an odd question. Who is the you that is communicating with them? Who is that you here that is doing the communicating? Where does that you come from? And so this gets us into the question of the self, or where does your self come from? Now, you may have not much thought about this, so we'll try to push it a little bit into it. There's one way of looking at this that says you just sort of are because you got born and you came into realizing that you're here. You had a consciousness of yourself, and that you come into the world as a fixed self with certain traits and characteristics. You're fearful or bold or you have communication anxiety when you talk, or you don't have it, or you're artistic, or you're scientific, that you come into the world as a package of traits and characteristics, and you spend your whole life unfolding what you are. Okay? So that's one way of looking at it, that's who you are. And that's called an essentialist view of the self, that there is an essence to you. There's a central core of traits and characteristics and things that are true of who you are, and that's just it. And you're going to be that the rest of your life. You're that from the time you're born. You're going to be that your whole life, and you may push it this way or the other a little bit, but you're basically what you were programmed, or what you came as. This is what you came into the world as. And so that's sometimes also called the view of the noble self. Now, this is not noble like, a prince or a princess in a movie or something, noble like that. What's that?
True or pure, right?
Well, no, it's not like the true or pure. It's pure in the sense that it remains what it is without being affected a lot by other influences. So if you took chemistry in high school a long time ago, you remember talking about the noble gases, maybe. And the noble gases are certain chemical things that don't interact with other things. They're inert. They don't interact. So they don't change. Other things mix with things and become different things. Noble gases stay the same. So this is the idea that you go through life and you encounter this, you encounter that, and basically you stay the same. And you react to things and you deal with things. All right, now that's probably a common view for you, that people are who they are. I am who I am, and that we all see the world pretty much the same, that there is a world, an objective world out there, and all of these selves running around see the same world. This is kind of a common noble self. We all live in the same world. Some people see it more clearly than others. Other people see it distorted. So I'm describing a particular perspective, a paradigm on the self. The same world, some see it more clearly. Some see it distorted. Where did we run into this idea that some people see the world more clearly than other people see the world? Do you remember? What is that?
Muted group?
Yeah, it was a little bit of that muted group. It was more in standpoint. It was the idea that the marginalized and the oppressed people see the world more clearly than the people in the center of the world. So that kind of fits in with this kind of a view, that some see it more clearly, some see it more distorted, but it exists. It's objective. There is an objective world. There is a essential self, and life and communication is all about all of these essential selves communicating with each other about the world that they see, and me trying to make you understand that the way you see the world is wrong, and the way I see the world is more clear than the way you see the world. So now we have this conflict going on about who's more objective about life and who sees what's right. I see this, you don't see it, you're distorted, I'm seeing it clearly. All right, so that's one view. Now there's another way of looking at this, which is more common in communication studies. And that has to do with the idea that the self is not an essential self, but it's a social self. And that it doesn't come as an essential thing, that you don't come into the world as this bundle of fixed characteristics and traits about who you are and what you are, but that those things are shaped and formed in your interactions. So that you come into the world as sort of a potential self that is realized in the process of interactions with others. And so who you are and what you are is a product of interactions that you have engaged in and that you have been part of. So here's a base, simple way to look at this. If you grow up in a home where you are constantly put down, made fun of, told that you are stupid and ugly and nobody wanted you anyway, and I don't know why we keep you here, what is that going to do to you? What is that likely to do to you?
Rob your self-confidence.
Okay, we would say that self that comes into existence, and that person, that self, has a low sense of their own value. So if you ask them, who are you? They would say, I'm stupid, I'm ugly, I'm worthless, I'm unwanted, I'm, whatever it is. So they would fill in that statement in a number of ways. Now that's going to have consequences for them, right? What kind of consequences is that going to have? That they've been in a setting where the interactions they've had have all told them, this is who you are. And it's gone that way. What are the consequences of that?
They'll have low self-esteem.
Okay, and then now move that one step forward. What are consequences of low self-esteem?
Depression.
Okay, they may get depressed, which then impedes their ability to function well in a workplace. So they get feedback in the workplace that says, you're not a good worker, you can't cope, right? So then that view gets reinforced by other feedback, other communication that comes to them. What else is going to happen?
They might not even be able to get hired someplace because, if you can't sell yourself, then nobody else is going to want you, and then that would also reinforce the idea of,
Okay.
What a loser am I can't even get hired.
Right, so you get into, within this model is the idea of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Within this model of the self is the idea that, to a large degree, you will become what you think you are. You will fulfill a sense of that. So you get the self-fulfilling prophecy. And so you relate to people in such a way that they reflect back to you the same things you already think about yourself. So this is sometimes called a reflective self. That the idea here is that we look to others to give us our view of who we are. So I'm looking to you to help me understand who I am. And the way you respond to me shapes who I think I am. So this is a cycle then of interaction that goes on. And this action takes place around symbols, like language and like nonverbal symbols and signals and physical things. If I leave you to live in a place that is ratty and dirty and all this stuff, that's a symbol of what I think of you. So now you're taking in all these symbols about who you are, And this can become yourself. That yourself is formed by these things. All right, so let's take a pause here for a minute. So you've got two views of the self. You've got the essentialist noble self, you've got the constructionist social self, the idea that we are created by the interactions that we have with others. The self is created by, or sometimes we say it's co-created. That we react, someone else reacts to us, we react back, and all this time we are creating a sense of who you are, who I am, and what we are together, and what the world is that we live in. So in this world, we are creating the world. The world is created by our interaction. Now that's obviously not the physical world of tables and chairs. It's not the stuff. We didn't create this by thinking about it. But it's the idea that we give it value. We determine what it is to us on the basis of our interactions with each other. Okay. So let's get some feedback on this. Have you gone over this in other classes before? Have you thought about this much? Do you agree? Do you disagree? What do you think about these things? Which of them do you like better?
As far as the constructionist view, I've read a lot, like in a lot of motivational books. There was a book I received in 8th grade, our 8th grade graduation from middle school, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens.
Okay.
And they also have a book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But in that book, I remember, and in a lot of books like it, they always say never to do that, like to look towards your interactions to validate who you are.
Right.
And to create your identity. I don't know. I kind of disagree with it in that case.
Someone's creating this. All right, did it. Yeah, Stephen Covey, you're talking about Stephen Covey's books.
Yeah.
And a lot of motivational stuff says stop letting other people tell you who you are. You take charge of telling yourself who you are. And so you define yourself rather than letting other people do that. Yeah, so that's part of this whole theoretical view. Laura?
I had always thought it was like a combination of both. Like, I've seen angry children as babies. Like, they just would not stop crying. But then as they got older, like, because of their interaction with their family, like, they've ended up mellowing out and becoming, decent, like, normal instead of, like, these angry children that they were. You know what I mean? So it's like, I could see both sides.
Okay, so
even a combination of the two.
So you see some kind of mixture of these as being that there is some fixed stuff that we come with, but that there's also a lot of ways in which the interactions we take on reshape that or make it right. So this would be a strong particular view, this would be a strong view, and then there are views in between that mix them.
It also seems like you kind of can't have one without the other to me, because if you're just born in and of yourself, and then that would make it really hard for us to communicate with other people because we're so like ourselves and wouldn't really be willing to push it. And then the constructionist thing, how are you supposed to kind of influence others if you don't have at least something going on inside you that's solid? So I kind of feel like they feed off each other.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of different.
I also feel that, in your youth, you really do a lot of communication and learn a lot of communication from your parents and your family. And as soon as you can communicate with them on a higher scale, and then once you reach a certain age, you're like kind of out in the world, and you're going to use that foundation and either elaborate on it if it's your thing, Or if you're really not into what your parents have taught you all those years, you're going to go in a reverse, find people who will take you to different places.
Okay, so you can use this to your advantage then, if it's true, that you can find people
Right.
who will take you the places you want to be, the kind of people you want to be,
Yeah, because
if
you're
we're
gonna be interacting with
if we're
others.
formed that way, right? So that's
I think the noble and social self kind of work hand in hand, as you have some people who are really true to themselves and they are who they are, whether you like it or not. And then you have the people who are relying on social, reflective self, and they look at those people to define who they are. So I think, you'll have those people who are true to themselves, and then other people who become like the people who are true to themselves, because they're trying to find their identity.
yeah. So maybe in that sense, you say that there are some people who are leaders, and some people who are followers in that sense. So.
I think noble self is kind of hard to grasp because I think somebody, everybody at one point or another in their lives has, seen somebody at school or seen something on TV that, like, I want that, I want to be like that, I want to, talk like that, or, so I think, in essence, I think everybody has a little bit of social self in them.
Right. Yeah. Well, this was what Mead said, and this is what the chapter talks about, that for a long time this was the view that dominated the studies of psychology and sociology and communication studies. And then George Herbert Mead came along, and he began to push sociology in a new direction and saying, there really is more about people that is formed socially than we have thought. So if you think of it that way, that Mead interjected a new perspective on how to think about people that balanced out this a bit, then you're on track. But just think about this for a minute. What's the difference then in the way you practice communication? How would these two views communicate or teach you to communicate differently with people? What would be some insights or some consequences of this?
Well, I guess if you were raised mostly on your noble self, you'd be more independent and look to yourself for answers. And if you're social self, then you're going to constantly rely on other people's input to validate yourself, and you'll constantly change to fit with the group, or because you wouldn't want to be excluded or anything like that. Or
all right. So one thing that the social self, if you were operating on the basis of thinking of people are formed by the interactions that they have, you would then watch more carefully the effect that people have on each other. You would say, people have a huge effect on each other. Whereas over here you'd say, people are who they are, you deal with other people's communication, but basically they stay the same. But if you're coming from this perspective, you would say, it's really significant, the friends you choose and the way you get talked to, because that will start a whole cycle of how you respond, how people respond to you, that will determine how your whole life goes. So these kinds of theories are much more, they're much more directive about what happens in your conversations with other people. Because they would say to you, listen, when you talk to anybody, when you talk to your brother, your sister, your parents, your friends, your significant other, you are not just talking to a self that is fixed. You are creating together who that person is and who they're becoming. And so if you want to be in a positive relationship with somebody, you want to think carefully about how you're co-creating that relationship.
Wait, I have a question. So like let's say you're saying like you could be like a certain person within yourself and then like present yourself differently than who you are actually.
Well, that's not exactly what we're going at here.
Oh, okay.
But That would probably be more out of this model, that you're not being true to yourself. Whereas Mead and others would say, Mead was really pretty deep about this. He was saying most everything is shaped by our social interactions and the language we have. We'll talk about this in a minute when we do the slides. You know, he talked about the I and the me. So there's an I that is kind of the base thing that's there, but then me is created by all this other stuff that goes on. So if you said that to Mead, that idea that, well, I'm